disciples, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth nations will be in dismay, perplexed by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will die of fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these signs begin to happen, stand erect and raise your heads, because your redemption is at hand. Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life, and that day catch you by surprise like a trap. For that day will assault everyone who lives on the face of the earth. Be vigilant at all times and pray that you have the strength to escape the tribulations that are imminent and to stand before the Son of Man. Thus far, the Gospel of Luke. Pretty exciting gospel. Yeah, it's bracing.
A lot of harsh words in there.
Well, I don't know if I would say harsh as much as frightening. And when you condense our sort of standard, normal, human fear of the unknown and fear of death and fear of annihilation and fear of the end of everything, when you condense all that and you try to put words behind it, well, that's what you come up with.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when you consider what the gospel is referring to, what Jesus is trying to help us get prepared for, and not out of fright, but simply as a reality that's coming, then these words don't seem out of place. They don't seem overly exaggerated. They are rhetorical. I was saying this in the homily yesterday here at the Chancery, with a similar scripture, that there's something eminently practical to the church's idea and the church's teaching and belief, which comes to us from the Lord, that we should live our lives always ready to meet him, because it is simply true that either we will be of that generation who are alive when he returns, which could happen tonight. It could happen at any time. We will either be that generation who are still living when he returns and who literally witness the end of everything, or we will meet him at our death, our own personal death. But one way or the other, in a day that we don't know, because in neither of those cases do we know when it's happening, we will meet him. And so if we live each day ready to meet him, then it won't catch us off guard. That's his point, be able to stand before the Son of Man. But who is it that we're trying to meet? It is the Lord of our life, the Lord who loves us, the Lord who saved us, the Lord who has done so much to help us throughout our life, the Lord who died for us. So we don't need to fear. This is not a living each day ready in fear that he would, Lord, save me if he catch me unready, as if somehow I'm going to be punished. That's a sort of a mercenary idea or approach.
Right.
But the approach of love is recognizing my beloved is coming, and when can I see him? And if we live that way, then we're both ready but also happy when death should find us or when the end of time comes.
It seems like the turmoil of the sort of final judgment, it's going to hit us one way or another. If we're not ready, it's going to hit us when he comes, or it's going to hit us when we actually die, because we're going to meet him regardless, to your point. But I think it's encouraging to hear those words, because sometimes when we go through these readings at the end of the liturgical calendar and then onward into the start of the new year, it's kind of funny. When I actually read this, I was I asked Daniel, I said, are you sure that wasn't for last Sunday? Because I thought we were in Advent now. We're talking about the season of hope and, believe in Jesus, and all this. And so I just, it's encouraging to hear that, that it is our goal to meet him ultimately. It is our goal. That's where we're headed. And if he is our beloved, and if we are walking in his ways, if we're following him, I think some of the lines from here are really interesting. People will die of fright. When I hear that, I think of someone who is so terrified, they've been scared to death. That's probably where the phrasing of that line, being scared to death, actually comes from, is people dying of fright in the final judgment. I think it's also interesting, beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life that catch you by surprise like a trap. All these sort of distractions, if you will. And so, Bishop, do you think that there is, this is sort of do you think that you will be frightful in that moment, or do you think that you will be steadfast, confident, courageous? You pick the word.
The church gives us the word reverent fear.
There we go.
And so I think I've used this analogy here on Tulsa Time before, talking about how when we were kids, we used to play with mercury that we got from a broken thermometer. And we pulled it. It was so cool. You could put it in your hand and make it divide into little balls, and then they would all come back together. Meanwhile, it's all poison, and we didn't know that it was leaking into our blood.
Yeah, extremely dangerous, actually.
And I've also used the analogy of, what if you were sitting next to a nuclear bomb that was armed? It's not likely to go off, but if you knew what it was, you would be terrified to be next to the thing, seeing what it could do if it goes off. So a reverent fear is a fear of something that is just so much infinitely powerful, that more powerful than I am, and more awesome than I am, filled with awe, more spectacular, that I naturally am going to stand in awe of it. We do that with a beautiful sunset. If you've ever witnessed, even if you've just watched it on TV, an actual real calamity of some kind, volcano explosion, mudslide, tornado, bus crash, whatever it would be, you just are caught up in it. It just terrifies you, the idea of it. And so seeing the world, the universe, come to its end would be, there's just no way that it cannot be that kind of an event. And even though you know that the Lord loves you, these days you can see St. John's in Bartlesville has one, but they have a good one. They have an image that they put up at Easter time. It's kind of a poster image of beautiful clouds with this amazing bright light coming through them, and Jesus coming in the clouds. Some of them are hokey, really hokey. You even have some that are memes and jokes, the Fonzie Jesus. Hey,
the old man with the smile in the clouds.
The trucker cap on backwards. Hey, I'm back. Okay, so that's silly. And some are just hokey because they're saccharine, syrupy.
Sort of modernized too much or something.
Yeah. But I think the ones that capture him as coming and as he is, but filled with majesty, I think those are close to what I would expect. And it would be frightening, Even if you're driving down the road completely obeying all the laws and your license is up to date and everything, you don't have any warrants out for you or anything, and those police lights show up behind you, it makes you nervous at the very least. And that's a very minor example of something compared to something like this. Here is the infinite judge who we believe loves us and is merciful, but yet we are sinners.
That's a good analogy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good analogy. Yeah. Thinking about that. Yeah. Following traffic laws, etc. But those berries and cherries are coming behind you and you wonder, oh man,
Yeah.
what is this about?
And so, ultimately what we're left with here in this kind of a warning where Jesus is using all of his rhetorical skill to help people realize this is really important, people, pay attention, is an act of charity. Because he's simply saying, he's not threatening anyone. He's just saying, be ready. Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness. That's not a threat. He's not saying, if you're drunk and carousing when I come, I'm going to smash you. He's not saying that. He's just saying, it's really important. Don't be living like that. Live this way. Live ready for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, live the way that I've paved for you so that you
Mm-hmm.
may also. I think of the quote from John Paul II when he says, it is Jesus that you seek when you dream of happiness, right?
Yeah. And it would be, we could have a different attitude if we were responsible for our own creation.
Mm-hmm.
Then who is he to demand this of us?
Yeah.
The author Milton wrote the work Paradise Lost, which we studied when I was in seminary and college. And in that work, Satan is arguing his case in the course of that work. And I defended Satan with my paper. It was one of our semester papers.
Okay.
I defended Satan
Go on.
in that paper and got an A on the paper. And the reason was because in Milton's conception, Satan is not a creature of God. And Satan is not, in a way, Satan can be held not responsible for his actions because of the way Milton conceives of how Satan is created. But in actual fact, Satan is a creature of God. And Satan is created by God for God's own self, the same way that you and I are. We are all creatures of God. We are not responsible for our own being. God did not have to bring us into being. God brought us into being because he knew we would be filled with joy and happiness in his embrace, loving him. That would be the end of our being. That's what we were created for. So to help us achieve that is a charity because it's helping us, even if we don't believe it. The atheist who's angry and doesn't believe it and doesn't want to believe it. That person, nonetheless, it's true for them. And if we could help them to see it, it would be a charity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These readings are sort of sobering in many ways, and sort of they kind of catch you off guard. They kind of slap you around a little bit if you're not expecting them. But so we're in sort of this interesting time where it's Thanksgiving week, and we're all celebrating Thanksgiving this week here in America, and it's a wonderful holiday, right? I have good memories of Thanksgiving from growing up, but how do we sort of be thankful in this time when we think about this? How do we practice gratitude as we sort of face sort of these messages around the end times?
Well, one way that comes to mind is the word Eucharist, right? Which is Thanksgiving. It's giving thanks. And so since we are a Eucharistic people, that would be front and center. Let's go to Mass if we can. Let's go to Mass to give thanks because that's the best way that we can give thanks.
Mm-hmm.
There's one image of Thanksgiving that is all about excess and all about, excessive eating, excessive drinking, excessive sweet foods, et cetera, et cetera. And so it comes from, simply the idea that for an agricultural people, the bigger your harvest, the better, because there will be food for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a lean harvest, that's worse because there might not be enough food for everyone. But most of us have all that we need, so we don't need to go into excess. What we could do instead as a way of giving thanks is to look out for other people who don't have enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, use Thanksgiving to go serve at a soup kitchen, or to bring food to the homeless on the street, or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's another way. Catholic Charities always has a big turkey giveaway to help people who are struggling with Thanksgiving. And they may give thousands of turkeys away, hundreds of turkeys away.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's unique about Thanksgivings that I experienced growing up, and you and I have talked about this many times, is my parents would always take us to Mass on Thanksgiving, which I think is somewhat unique.
Mm-hmm.
It was until about the fourth grade I thought Thanksgiving was a holy day of obligation. And we didn't go to a ton of daily Mass. We went to Catholic school, but it was my fourth grade teacher, I think, who said, what are the holy days of obligation? I said, well, Thanksgiving. And she just kind of laughed in my face and was like, no, that's not a holiday. That's just an American holiday, buddy.
Yeah.
She's supposed to eat turkey and watch football that day. But did you grow up with any sort of Catholic sort of Thanksgiving traditions, or what were your best memories of Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we mostly played in the yard. We might have had by then. I don't think we did, though. I was going to say we might have had some of the Christmas decorations up, but I don't think we even did that yet. But we just among ourselves, we had enough to play football in the yard.
It was a party.
But there were always cousins or neighborhood kids around.
That's right.
So it was largely a family thing, and I think most people experience it that way.
That's
people
right.
typically travel. Let's go see the family, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
To recognize this is a special day of giving thanks, but shouldn't we live every day? Shouldn't we always be striving to live a thankful life? One of the ways to battle negative thoughts and depressive thoughts and things like that is precisely to take stock, to take stock about things that are going well, or that God has done for us, or that people do for us. So giving thanks can be a great way to recover your emotional equilibrium.
That's right. Take stock while you make stock, because that gravy is an important piece.
That it is. I remember distinctly, that's one of the distinct memories, is Mom up early, like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Making that stuffing, tearing that bread apart, stuffing that turkey, making that stuffing.
That's amazing.
And of course, we always had to have a huge turkey, like 22, 25-pound turkey,
Well,
Takes
yeah.
a while to cook one of those things.
And they're all just pumped with water these days. They're huge. You can get them pretty big at Walmart. I mean, it's not hard to get a big butterball turkey these days. So going back to creation. So how is creation a resemblance of God's love for man?
Well, we have our own, we hear that word these days, creation and care of creation and so forth. And often these days it has a kind of a secular spin on it, which is kind of alarmist. So the idea that somehow we are destroying the earth, we're laying waste to the environment, and the planet is warming and the climate is warming and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes the reason to care for the earth, because we're doing damage to it. But our own Catholic spiritual tradition has always had the idea of a care for the earth that comes from the book of Genesis, where God gives to man and woman all of creation, all of the plants and the animals, to have dominion over them and to use them as the gifts that God has given them to be. And so, you don't take a gift and just trash it. You shouldn't, right? It doesn't show gratitude to the giver. Rather, if someone gives you a gift, one way to show gratitude to them is to use the gift in its intended fashion and to appreciate it, to use it well. So, when we create, for example, energy is a big part of the topic. When we talk about the creation of energy and the use of energy, to keep in mind that there are about 2 billion people on the planet who don't have adequate energy, they don't even have electricity, should help us to see we still need to be very good stewards of our fossil fuels, of the things that we use to create energy, precisely so that we can help those people achieve a more humane standard of living and at the same time take care of creation. So, for example, when we talk about natural gas and using natural gas to create electricity, that's a very clean way to create electricity compared to coal or oil-fired or something like that. Well, let's use more of that so that we can create more energy that people need, recognizing that one of the things energy gives us the ability to do is to take care of people, to create a humane standard of living for people. If you don't have electricity, if you live in a country that doesn't have adequate power, electricity, the other things you don't have are hospitals. You don't have sterilization equipment. You don't have refrigeration. If you don't have refrigeration, there's lots of medicines that you can't have. So you see, those things quickly begin to pile up on themselves. And so what we should do is be responsible about how we use it, but use it, and not fear that we're destroying the planet somehow by using it. And I think that comes from a more balanced Catholic perspective on care of creation.
Yeah, and you are always one who's very quick to talk about, in the past, you've talked to me quite a bit about sort of the intricacy of a flower and the vastness of the universe, and to take the time to step back and see that clearly a sign of God's love when we see the order of all of this, beauty, order.
I was reading yesterday an article that was talking about a new theory about dark matter.
Oh, okay.
And so just hearing that all of the actual material things that we can see, the planets and the stars and the dust and the nebulae and so forth, that those things only account for something like 10% of the matter in the universe is just mind-boggling. And that there's all this other matter that is responsible for the energy that is driving the universe to expand, but we can't see it. We don't yet know what it is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Those kinds of things are fascinating. And I think those kinds of things becoming, just in a very amateur way, aware of those kinds of things, evokes in a person a reverence for creation. And I think the more that people have an awareness and a reverence for creation, the more that they will care for it. Yeah, without becoming alarmist about that care.
Yeah, it's amazing. I also think, just the act of God's creation, it literally invites us to a relationship with Him. And invites us into a relationship. We're called to be in community with one another. And that is the ultimate gift. It is interesting to think about. For those of us who had loving parents or who had parents or who have had healthy relationships, it's probably a little bit easier for us to sort of imagine or understand the gift of what that relationship is. There's brokenness in the world, and so it's harder for some to experience that love or see that creation as an experience or an encounter with God's love.
If it's a natural transference for us to transfer onto God what we think of Father, which comes from our own Father, and if we didn't have a healthy relationship with our own Father, we're going to tend to transfer the pain of that, the disappointment of that, the fear of that, the trauma of that onto God the Father, and then that's going to get in the way of that relationship. There will need to be some healing to help that relationship happen. And vice versa, right? The more that men and women, as they enter into marriage, recognize that a primary way that they can evangelize their children is simply by loving them, being the loving mother, the loving father. It doesn't mean that there's not discipline. There is discipline. Love is a form of, or discipline is a form of love. So there can be discipline, but it's done in a loving way, in a just way, in a caring way. The more that we do that, the more that those children will be sort of made ready to transfer those positive feelings to God, who is infinitely greater and better than all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also a good reflection on our own encounters with the Lord, our own personal encounters, to have that encounter, to seek Him daily, because, you know, maybe it's a little bit too extreme to say all human relationships will fail us. I think those who I've known closest, have not been perfect. And I can say that pretty confidently because I know I'm far from that in the way that I treat others. Not that I'm going to treating everybody terribly, but it's difficult.
I mean, that's what I've heard.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Anyways, but the point being, just His love is perfect, and so
right. God is not. I mean, that's the part that's hard for us to get. God is not just nicer than the nicest person we know.
Right.
God is completely other. Nice comes from God, not the other way around. God is not, we don't compare God to love. Love is compared to God. Love is God. God is love.
Right.
So we will expect that kind of goodness from God, but it will come in a manner that is beyond what we've ever experienced. So we don't have a way to know what it would be like. The best experience that we have of human love is given to us as an image of what God's love would be like.
Bishop, have you heard this phrase before? It goes something like, it's easier to say what God is not rather than to say what God is. I could be saying that wrong. Maybe you could maybe sort of give
that's
a commentary on that.
I think that's right. If you say that that God is omniscient, all-knowing, then you try to unpack all-knowing. Well, the list just goes on forever. It means that there's nothing that He doesn't know. If you say it in the negative, well, that's shorter. There's nothing that He doesn't know. What does He know? Well, the list goes on forever. Mm-hmm. Right.
So, Bishop, so we're talking about Thanksgiving. We're talking about gratitude. We're talking about, the end times. We're talking about all these things. We're talking about gifts, true gifts from God. In what ways can we be blind to those? What are the pitfalls where we can be blind to those gifts and receiving that? I
think one way, which we've talked about some often here, is our media culture. And so when we say virtual reality, what we mean by that is it's not reality. It's like reality, but it's not reality. And, how often have you seen something online that you said, wow, thank you, God, versus how often have you seen something in the real world? It happens in real relationships with people. It happens in the beauty that surrounds us in nature. It happens with, experiences that we encounter in our own body. So if we're too distracted, if, the image is, our head is always down looking at a screen. Mm-hmm. That's the image. But if we, what do you think of when you say God's grandeur? You don't look down at a screen.
Yeah,
you look
totally
up because
it's funny, but it's true.
Yeah,
it's funny, but it's true.
When one of the things that I do on my day off, whenever we have beautiful clear sky and I'm out at my cabin, is get up early so that I can watch shooting stars, because you can see them pretty much all the time if you simply sit still and look at a particular part of sky long enough. Usually within a half an hour, you'll see at least one. And I do that in part because that reminds me, and that is an experience of the grandeur of God, because that thing that just went like that across the sky, who knows where it came from in the universe, and who knows where it's going, if it survived going through our atmosphere. And so, again, it's a small little example of the vastness of what God has created.
Yeah, that's an awesome reflection. I think to something that maybe to you seems redundant, or you feel like, oh, I'm really beating this dead horse. But the thought of how often do we look at our phone and say, wow, thank you, God, and just be awestruck by his goodness, his greatness, his gifts. Yeah, I can't recall a time.
It can happen. You get a text.
You get a great email, or, one of those great memes, from Father Castle when he's joking around,
Now, and again, so we're not, to make sure that people understand, we're not anti-technology, anti-social media or anything.
Obviously.
Take Bishop Robert Barron, We're on Fire. I mean, the kinds of beautiful videos and things that they produce will make you think, thank you, God, for the greatness of that saint or that beautiful place or this thing that happened in history, whatever. So yes, it is there, but do we spend most of our time looking at that, or do we spend most of our time looking at other silly things?
And to those of you who spend most of your time looking at those beautiful things done by Word on Fire, tip of the cap to you, because I think that you are less the majority. So anyways, beautiful thoughts. Thank you all for listening this week, and we hope you have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.